Hello everybody, I'm Camila Alfaro and I will be with you for the next minutes. Thanks for joining us to this conversation with Dr. Alex Strauch. Dr. Alex, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, and we are very glad to have you here. And our audience wants to meet you, so please tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. I live in Michigan, which is in the north of the United States. I've been here my whole life, but I've traveled quite extensively. For the last 6 years, I've been working as a commercial poultry veterinarian. 5 of those years were for a commercial poultry company. And this last year, I've been an independent veterinarian where I'm able to service different types of poultry operations. I mostly work in the US, but have a little bit of international contacts in the Netherlands and some parts of Africa.
Okay, and before we start, I would like to remind our audience that on Agri News FM, our podcast channel, you can find this and many other talks with poultry experts. And today, Dr. Alex will give us important tips and details about how to optimize your farm weekly production meeting, since in animal productions, as well as other areas, we need to pay attention to all components, including people, and it is essential to put things in the right side to be successful. Then, Dr. Alex, what is the purpose of a weekly production meeting?
The purpose of a weekly production meeting is to force or make sure that everybody is on the same page and on top of their data. And when I say on top of their data, I mean the right people are looking at the right numbers so that we never get behind on our metrics and we don't let things get too out of spec.
Now that we know the purpose of the meeting, Dr. Alex, collecting data and its analysis is of critical importance to detect failures or problems within the systems. Can you please discuss why and how often your team should formally review data?
Okay, that's a fair question. The team has to review the data because poultry production is all about constant monitoring and surveillance. This is surveillance to the tune of a couple key metrics that are looked at every day, no matter what's going on. And I'm saying that we should be having these meetings about once a week, minimum. If you have, for example, 3 farms within an operation, there should be 3 separate production meetings so that the whole team can look at all the numbers at one time, kind of like a huddle.
Accordingly, Dr. Alex, companies set different goals to be accomplished during the year or in a determined period, and our audience would like to know how many key performance indicators or performance parameters should be monitored per meeting, and which ones do you consider the most important?
All right, so for KPIs or key performance indicators, I always start with, when we're discussing these, the correct signalment of the flock. Now, in veterinary school, we learned about you have to have the stats of the animal or the group of animals before we even talk about them. So if we're including the signalment or the age, breed, weight, and production style of the birds, after that, then we can include about, I would say, 6 to 8 KPIs, depending on the type of production system or poultry operation you're working with. For example, I've done a lot of work in commercial commercial egg laying operations. And I would say, as long as you have the signalment, there are about 8 other metrics or KPIs that I would like to see brought up and analyzed during a meeting. In some particular order here, those would include the egg production for the week, case weight, the feed consumption, water consumption, the weekly mortality rate, the cumulative mortality at that point in time, and then if you're in cage free, also include the number of floor eggs and floor birds that are being seen. Now, those numbers can be averaged out to give a weekly summary, and I'll kind of cut it off of there so I don't keep rambling, but about 8 key KPIs.
It's very clear how to conduct these weekly meetings, but I guess, Dr. Alex, the people listening or watching this interview is wondering who should be at the meeting.
Okay. The key decision makers should be at the meeting. And I know that that sounds broad, but I always like to have the veterinarian there, the nutrition manager, and then outside of that, I like to have the farm manager, the one who's in charge of everybody in all operations, not just bird health. And then I'd like to have the supervisor for the set of barns that are being looked at. If there's an assistant manager or an assistant supervisor, I'd like to see them there as well. In essence, get somebody from management, get somebody from veterinary med, get somebody from nutrition, and then get the person who's actually supervising that barn in there. And of course, if you need a translator in the room, get the translator in the room, or we cannot talk to the people who are actually working with the birds.
And to make this meeting very productive and optimize the time of the people, let me ask you, is there any format or a script of the meeting you think can be useful?
Absolutely. And in brief summary here, the idea of following a weekly script is very similar to the concept of rounding that is done in a hospital setting. We could think an animal hospital or a human hospital, where the day shift maybe comes or is leaving and the night shift comes in. And so they all have a huddle when they go around in a circle and talk about the cases they have that day and what their plans are. So if we take this concept of rounding from the hospital setting and we bring that script to the farm, we shouldn't miss anything if we follow it top to bottom every time. And that script is reminiscent of something I was mentioning earlier, where you start with the signalment of the flock, the name, the age, the weight, the breed, the production style, and then you go in to the around eight KPIs. So you will, again, from top to bottom, say, this is flock XYZ. They are 35 weeks old. They are a 3.2 pound DeKalb white flock in a cage-free barn. And then you hit those 8 KPIs again. They're producing X amount of eggs. They have Y case weight. They're eating this much feed, this much water, weekly mortality rate, cumulative mortality rate, and possibly bring in the amount of floor eggs and floor birds that are being left in the system. If you follow that script every time, it's really hard to miss a number that should be included. After you've taught all those stats in a formal setting with everybody else around you, everybody should be able to come up with let's say, an investigation if necessary, if one of your numbers is off by a little bit.
And Dr. Alex, getting an idea of how you conduct your team meetings, I see you might discover new problems or situations, and it can make you deepen on each one of them to find the root cause of the problem. So how do you run a root cause analysis and determine the corrective actions?
All right, so you're getting into the fixing part or the investigation part of this meeting, and that's obviously why we're conducting the meetings. If you are going over your script and you find that some of the numbers are out of specification, it is good practice to start, even if you don't have the answer during that meeting, but start a root cause analysis, where you go in and you come up with a plan to find out why one of those 8 key metrics was out of spec. After you come up with a plan of why or find out what the root cause was, then you'll need to start, coming up with a couple ideas. It doesn't have to be the correct idea at that exact same time, but come up with a correct possible number of corrective actions that can be taken. If I can give one short example, it's, all right, we have abnormally low feed for the last 2 days. Our root cause analysis could be the feed tastes terrible, or there was a missed feeding, or it got incredibly too hot. So we go find out and investigate what went wrong and come up with a corrective action to make sure that we are not at low feed consumption for the next week moving forward.
And how will you promote the why within teams and increase the sense of ownership?
Promoting the why within teams. This one gets into team psychology, right? And I have found in kind of the last 6 years that the poultry teams that are tied to the how and why of what they're doing are the ones that are most successful and the ones that have their heart in their work. When you bring a supervisor or an assistant supervisor for a number of barns into a weekly production meeting to sit there with your management, your veterinarian, your nutritionist, they feel a sense of team and a sense of ownership for what they're doing. The example that I'm going to give here is, hey, we're going to run a water supplement for house number 1. We're going to do this because there's a slightly loose manure and a tiny bit of diarrhea in the house. If the supervisor knows why we're doing that, they might feel more connected to the problem.
And finally, Dr. Alex, do you have any advice to improve meeting efficiency and the decision-making process?
Yes, I will go off of the last 6 years and see which farms have done the best and which farms need a little bit more push. But I'll tell you this, the ones that do it every week have their meeting in an organized script. No matter what's going on, they have it at least once a week. Those are the farms that are on top of their data. They don't make excuses. If data is missing, they go find it and they make sure to put it in. A lot of life is, showing up. And if we mandate that we go over all of our data in a formal setting once a week, that will do an incredible amount of good for our operations.
Dr. Alex, again, thanks for accepting this invitation. We had a good time learning from your experience on this interesting topic. And is there anything else you would like to add or any take-home message to share with the public?
Yes, that these meetings are very regimented, but they don't have to be boring. I would say being able to cast a production chart onto a TV or a projector during the meetings can help people visualize the numbers that are being talked about instead of just looking at a packet. If you get it up on the screen, brings everybody on the same page, it draws everybody's eyes to the same numbers. And it really helps if you have one charismatic person lead the meeting to keep everybody engaged. So I know these are numbers, but they can be made to be interesting. And in a group setting, it can be fun as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Alex. And thank you to all people that are listening or watching this interview. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channels and follow us on social media. See you in the next interview with the Avenues experts. Bye-bye.